What is going on, you guys? My name is Cody Thixton, and this is Interesting Podcast, coming to you guys on August 8th, 2023 for episode 66, where today we have another very, very special guest. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. Make sure to go and follow me on social media at CodyT503. That's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Let's get right into this. And now, I am very proud to introduce Abigail Warren.
Hey, hello. How's it going?
Oh, it is awesome to have you here. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. I'm excited to be here. I love doing podcasts.
I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if we could just start out for all of the people who maybe don't know you, maybe introduce your name, where you're from, and how long you've been in pro wrestling.
Yeah. So my name is La Bruja, Abigail Warren. I am from the Sacramento, California area. I've been wrestling. That's always a tough one to answer because I started technically wrestling when I was 9 years old. Wrestled for a couple years and then took a break to be a child and play sports and go to school. And then got back to it when I was about 17. So I've been around wrestling my entire life.
That is so crazy. So like you just said that like you started at like 9 years old. Like that has to be an insane age to actually get into something like this.
Yeah, definitely. It's always sort of been the family business. And so yeah, my first match was actually with my younger brother, Titus Alexander. You might know when he was 6. Yeah.
Wow. That is insane. So like well, how did that whole like opportunity like come to be at such a young age?
Well, so for those who don't know, it's kind of always been in the family. My dad is another pro wrestler by the name of Big Ugly JD Bishop. Made a huge name for himself in all up and down the West Coast, and especially in Portland. Um, and you know, being a kid and being around that, obviously, it's so fascinating. And he just had the idea of like, well, what if if you guys want to do it, we'll get you trained and we'll get you a match. And obviously, being young children who loved wrestling, that was we wanted nothing more than to be a part of the show. So we put in the work, and we spent the entire time training with the SPW Academy, and within that time we had our first match.
That is awesome. That is so awesome. I also heard that it was also Virgin Flynn that was a part of your training academy. Was that like when you were 17 or more younger?
I trained with Virgil a bit when I was 17, but I grew up with Virgil. He came from that same class at SPW, so he actually trained under my dad. And then when I came back to wrestling, he was running his own school, just to show you kind of how full circle all of it was. And yeah, I trained with VF3 Academy for a little bit as well.
That is really cool. So, like, when you were actually going to your first training or match when you were 17, did you kind of like wrestling back when you were such a young age really help you as far as that nervousness before actually going and doing professional wrestling again?
I think, yeah, just kind of being around it for so long. And also, I stopped wrestling for that little bit, but I still kept performing. I was actually a dancer for several years. Um, so I never kind of lost that performance aspect. And then, my first match back being against my dad definitely helped quell some of that nervousness as well, because I knew I was in there with somebody who knew what they were doing. Um, so yeah, I definitely feel like there were a lot of factors that kind of made me feel less nervous than somebody would typically going into like their first match.
Yeah. Yeah, so, like, when you were actually entering into that match, like, against your dad, and you had just kinda said that, like, it kinda calms your nerves a little bit more to kinda know that you're with somebody that is really, really experienced, and one thing I wanted to ask you was, like, what was one thing that he had kinda told you when you were growing up about professional wrestling that just really, like, stuck in your mind?
I think the thing that stuck with me the most, um, not necessarily like a certain phrase, but just uh, I think he gave us such a respect for the business. Um, we were really young kids, and I think there was this extra uh fear or worry from certain people that, we would just be going in there and messing around and being two kids who were not knowing what they were doing.
Mhm,
And I think him just drilling in the fact that we needed to respect the business, and it was something that, if you're passionate about it, then you'll give it that respect back, that you want back from it. And I think him giving us that attitude, really kind of shaped who we are today as wrestlers.
that is really awesome. Yeah, I also heard that, like, he also owns the, Big Ugly Dojo. Is that
Yes,
like a
the Ugly
yeah,
Dojo
like
is
a
our training academy, yes.
that is so awesome. So, like, when did he actually, like, acquire that, and, like, how did it feel to, like, be with him and, like, know what, he brings to the sport?
So, the Ugly Dojo kind of came together, a few years ago. We have such an interesting training history because, most people, you Google wrestling school, you do your research, you go to wrestling school for however much time until you're ready, and then you start doing shows. But because of the way we were brought up, our training was so different and sporadic. We were always training, but we weren't necessarily a part of one school. We were
Mhm,
just a part of Big Ugly. And I think that's kind of where he birthed the idea of the Ugly Dojo was, we didn't have, you know, Tuesday through Thursday classes. It was just every time we were together, we were working on something. And so it kind of just became our sort of little group of, him, myself, my brother, Titus Alexander, and then our good pals, Dorian Gray and Joe Gamble, all kind of became the Ugly Dojo through that.
that is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, like, earlier you had brought up about, like, living in Sacramento. So, like, is that
Yes.
is that where you are, like, currently located?
Yes, I currently am in Sacramento, yeah.
That is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
how long of, like, a mob is it to, like, come up here and, like, come to Oregon and go to all these pro wrestling events and then have to go down? Like, that has to be insane.
Yeah, the travel time can definitely be tough, especially, sometimes you fly and it's a couple hours of actual flying, but then all this time at the airport, and then sometimes you do drive and it's, for one weekend, 18 to 20 hours, you're
Mhm.
spending on the road to essentially wrestle for 8 to 15 minutes, you know? Um, so it's a lot, and that's why I tell people, man, like, no one can ever question that, indie wrestlers don't love this stuff because it is a lot of time and energy on your brain and your body to get 10 minutes of what you love to do.
Oh, that is so awesome. So do you have, like, maybe one trip that, like, you mostly enjoyed when it came to either traveling wherever?
I always love traveling, especially when it's with either some of my other friends, um that I come around with. I've made some trips with. I saw you had her on here before, but my friend Amira, we've traveled together. As Zay Perez as well. We've all traveled together. Um, but I think there was one specific trip that we took to do DOA up there in Portland. It was the five of us from the Ugly Dojo, and we are just those kinds of people, man. When you put the five of us in a room, it will be 9 straight hours of laughing as hard as you can, to the point where you get ready for your match and you're already exhausted. So I think just traveling with those guys, has given me some of my favorite memories of the business.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was interviewing, Amira, I
Mhm.
think it was you guys that all went down to San Francisco. Is
Yes,
that
yeah, we
correct?
went down there for the Folsom Street Fair.
Yeah. Yeah, so how was that whole experience for you?
It was great. We actually so that we did POW the night before, um, at a place called Blair Alley,
Mhm.
um, which was just such a fun venue. I miss Blair Alley a lot. And yeah, originally I wasn't even on that show. I had a last minute booking fall out and got canceled like 2 days before that POW show. And so I reached out to Mr. Ulala, who's the owner of POW Pro Wrestling. And I actually took a train up to Eugene, Oregon just to be on that show, because I knew I could get there and then travel back down with Amira for San Francisco. So that was a long one, but
Mhm.
that just goes to show how much I love being up there around them. Was I sat on a overnight train ride, last minute just to uh, get to go up there and wrestle with them. And it ended up being, such a blast to be around. And kind of was like the very start of like me and Amira becoming really good friends.
That is so cool. Yeah, so, like, what is, the number one aspect of professional wrestling that you enjoy the most?
Honestly, this is gonna sound really silly to some people, I'm sure, but I I I think it's kind of given me the avenue to be the theater kid I never got to be. I was always so busy playing sports, I never got to do theater like I wanted to. Um, and pro wrestling is such a beautiful way to tell those stories and put those athletics to use, but also tell, some incredible stories. And, you know, a perfect example was this past weekend was the Queen of Thorns. And I had people telling us after that, they were crying and they don't get emotional about wrestling, but this was just such a different thing. So yeah, it's really just that entertainment aspect and being to tell these stories and put on, shows for people.
Yeah. So, like, how does that feel whenever, like, somebody comes up to you and, like, they're obviously emotional about what you did in the ring? Like, that has to be absolutely insane.
It's amazing. I overthink things so much. And I know I'm such a perfectionist in the way of like, when I think about things, it's in my head and I know, I need it to go a certain way. So when people come up to you and all that work you put in and all that, time and energy you spent thinking about it worked and you get the response you wanted, yeah, it feels incredible.
That is so awesome. Yeah, one thing, I also wanted to bring up to you is I was, like, scrolling through YouTube and,
Mhm.
you were in a steel cage match with, Kelly Page,
Yes.
and I was sitting there watching that, and I just wanted to ask you, like, was there one stipulation that, like, you found, like, the most fun?
For that or just in general throughout my
Um,
career?
just, in general, I thought that was also interesting.
Yeah. Um, I haven't gotten to do too many, like, matches with, like, full on stipulations necessarily,
Mhm.
um, but I do love doing, like a good street fight. I think it's so much fun, um, because it's just you really get to just do whatever and get creative, and those are usually the matches where I end up doing, the dumbest things I can think of. Uh, a few weeks ago, I did a street fight, and it was at an outside venue, and I got the brilliant idea to do a vertical suplex directly onto the concrete. Um, so it was really cool, and I got really great footage. But yeah, it didn't feel cool for the next couple days. Um, but so yeah, I think having any kind of like street fight or a hardcore fight is kind of, well, it's always good news to hear.
Yeah, I know when was, like, going throughout your footage, I had seen you, like, taking, like, kendo sticks. So, like,
Yeah.
how does that feel? Because like, we've seen through the annals of history the effects of a kendo stick, like, how much how much does that hurt?
I I feel like, ever since more and more of the business has been pulled back, there's this weird mentality that all of a sudden people assume kendo sticks don't hurt. Oh, they're just loud. Um, they suck. They hurt a lot. It's essentially bamboo that has been split. So it's less of just getting hit in the back with like a blunt object, and it's more of like a whip and a crack.
Mhm.
Um, Especially when you get one that, somebody just put together themselves with duct tape. Yeah, it doesn't feel great, and it definitely leaves a lot of marks.
That is so awesome. Well, with respect to every one of your competitors, is there one match that, like, you mostly enjoyed as like, throughout your career?
Honestly, like I've had so many amazing matches and people that like I really, like was amazed to get to work. But I think
Mhm.
this past weekend, that main event that I had at Queen of Thorns with me and Amira is probably one of my favorite matches I've ever had. Um, we've wrestled a few times before, and we've always had really good matches. But there was something about this one that just had like a certain energy and a certain air to it. That by the end, like I know when not only the fans are crying and not only are we crying, but people in the back who are also on the show are crying. Um, and everyone just, felt so emotional about it. Uh, that's when I knew, it was something special.
That is so awesome. That is so awesome. Yeah, I was also gonna, bring up to you just because earlier you had brought up, Mr. Ooh La La, and I
Yes.
know that there was a very extended time in which he was your manager and
Yes.
whatnot. So, like, how was that working with the owner of POW Pro Wrestling and having him in your corner?
It was great. I love, I love Ulala. He's such a character. Um, and he's got such an old school, mind and mentality to him. And me being someone who loves the theatrics and loves the storytelling, we got along great for the time that we were together. So yeah, I've always enjoyed working with him and for him over at POW.
That is so cool. I know, he was kinda bringing up that, like, he would, like, hang, like, a key and,
Yes.
like, dangle it in front of you as, like, hypnosis. So, like,
Mhm.
who came up with that whole gimmick? Like, that is so awesome.
We kind of brainstormed that when we were getting ready to work together, um, and that was right around the midst of when everything was going on with Britney Spears and her sort of conservatorship, and it was a really hot thing in media at the time, and so
Yeah.
we wanted to kind of integrate that, and so that's kind of you know y- you want to integrate that, but it's good to have that visual aspect, and so that's kind of he came up with the idea of the key, um, and the amount of sparkly lanyards this man bought to match his outfits every time is still not lost upon me. So,
Yeah, I've always wondered, like, how many outfits does Mr. Ooh La La have? Like, that is so crazy.
and he always had a key lanyard to match. I don't know how he did it, but
Oh, that is awesome. Yeah, as I was going through, POW Pro Wrestling, I saw that you were able to compete with Kid Bandit, and I
yes.
was like, "Whoa, like, that is so awesome." So, like, I watched the match, and, you and her were, like, outside of the ring, and,
Mhm.
like, you had kind of gone to pick her up, and then you just slammed her, like, on the stairs, and, like, I was like, "Oh my god." So awesome. So, like, how was that working alongside her?
It was so great because I got to meet Kid Bandit at one of the DOA shows, and, you know, I'm so bad at following, wrestling on social media. I wish I was better at it, but I'm so terrible at it. So like I had heard of her before, but it was kind of lost on me exactly how big of a star she was at the time.
Mhm,
Um, and then we had a few interactions, and slowly over time I started seeing more and more from her and realizing like, oh, this is somebody I want to work, like she just not only moveset wise, but just her energy and like her ability to perform and entertain, like it was just so captivating. And I was like, I know we'd put on a spectacle. Um and then at that time, I was getting a lot of really amazing opponents at POW, and I saw that I was wrestling kid, and it was so easy and so fun and entertaining, and we just had such a good wavelength together. I
mhm.
think both kind of craving to put on a good show, which does lead to horrifically devastating moments like getting power bombed onto steel steps, but um, you know, creating those memories that people still talk about, I think was great.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I like the end of the match, how like she was kind of telling you like you should do this, and then
Mhm.
like trying to get you to turn against Mr. Ooh La La, and then you just choke slammed her through the chair. That's so awesome.
If you watch back to that too, like I am tearing up at the idea because a lot of that was, we're telling stories and we're in character, but a lot of that was real. We'd
Mhm,
had conversations about that before. Um and obviously both of us being trans wrestlers kind of coming up in wrestling, it was cool to hear that from someone so popular, that they kind of saw, that I had a lot more to me than most people think.
yeah.
So yeah, it was a really cool moment, and then immediately turning around and putting her through a chair, but
Yeah, I kinda noticed when I was watching that footage and you were leaning up against the bottom rope, like, you can kinda see your lip quiver a little bit,
yeah,
and that's when I was like, "She's getting emotional right
yeah.
now." So it's like, how is it kind of going through those moments that maybe mean a lot to you in pro wrestling, but you kinda have to keep your composure? Like, how do you go about that?
I've always been someone, obviously there are moments where you kind of have to go against the emotions you feel. Um, but I've always found myself at my best when I let my real life emotions kind of bleed into, Abigail, and kind of crank them up to 11. And so a lot of the times I really just let myself feel whatever I'm feeling. And it kind of drives that energy. And especially like, you'll notice it like when I'm working heel, I'll take those real life frustrations and just kind of let it all in there. And that's what makes it look so real. It's because, to some degree it is.
Mhm,
And it's the same thing when a moment like that happens. That means a lot. I can stand there and be stoic and try and look cool, or I can really let it bleed through and show everybody that this doesn't just mean a lot to, La Bruja, but to me. And that's kind of where though that separation kind of bleeds together. And I think it makes it a little bit more real for everyone.
yeah. Yeah, you were just talking about, like, making it more real for everybody, and something that I
Mhm.
had kind of realized whenever I'm watching wrestling is that wrestlers kinda have to be aware of where the camera is.
Mhm.
So, like, is that something that you kinda have to keep in mind whenever you're trying to maybe, like, hide outside the ring or you know what I mean?
I tell I tell everyone this to this day. One of the things I joke about constantly is that I do not get enough credit for my ability to know exactly where every single camera is. If you watch if you watch if you watch footage of almost any match of mine or see pictures of any match of mine, there is guaranteed to be at least one moment where I point and wink at a camera. I love knowing where they are because, we're playing to the people who are there, but I think a lot of people forget that we're also playing to hopefully 4 or 5 times more people who are at home.
Mhm,
um And so not only, making the crowd there feel seen and heard, but the people who are watching at home, it all it's just going to be silly because I feel like whenever you bring up somewhat modern wrestling, people kind of get weird about it. But there's a moment, it was when Shinsuke Nakamura wrestled Sami Zayn at I think it was Takeover Dallas. And there's a moment where, the crowd's just doing their thing where they're letting that moment sink in that he's finally here. And the hard cam zooms in, and right at that moment, Shinsuke turns and gives the camera a wink. And I thought that was so brilliant because it hits you. You're like, oh my God, that was for me, And I feel like being able to, like, ever since then, I've been like, oh my God, like, I need to know where every camera is, because if I can play to it, I'm going to.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there any other inspirational things that other wrestlers have done that you're like, that is something I wanna do?
Honestly, half of the stuff I do I stole from Big Ugly.
Mhm.
Half of the, most of the things, because I grew up watching wrestling, but I enjoyed it, TV wrestling. But as a kid, I was always like, I don't really care about what's on TV because every weekend I can go see it in real life. So, like,
Mhm.
my biggest inspirations were like my dad and, the Blanchards, and you know, like the people who are around in that era, uh, I think shaped. And so a lot of my inspiration comes from him.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
That is really cool. Well, what is one thing, like one piece of advice that maybe you would give somebody who is an up and coming wrestler? Not up and coming, but wanting to get into professional wrestling. I apologize.
Yeah, no, you're fine. Um, I think if I was to give any advice, it is go in with no expectation and as a blank slate. Because I think one of the biggest mistakes that young wrestlers make, and I'm sure some people might get upset about it, but when people go in with a predetermined idea of what character they want to do, or how they think they're going to wrestle, or whether they're going to be a heel or a face or whatever, idea, before they've even spent one day training in that ring, they have their whole character. And 9
Mhm.
times out of 10, you're going to do nothing like what you thought you were going to do. And you're going to be completely different. You're not going to be anything like, your favorite wrestler on TV,
Mhm.
because realistically, you shouldn't want to be in the first place. But the people who train you are gonna figure out what your biggest assets are, and you get the fundamentals first, and then make them you. So
Mm.
when you go in with this idea of, oh, here's my character, it's never gonna work because it's never gonna feel authentic.
Yeah.
So learn to wrestle first, then all the rest of that flows in, and you put yourself in the ring.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so interesting. So, like, one thing I had kind of like gone through Facebook, and one wrestler kind of reposted this, um, not like I was going to say tweet, but just post about not allowing poorly trained professional wrestlers like to get into the ring.
Mhm.
And that was something that I found really interesting is like I couldn't imagine all of the amount of professional wrestlers that could have been good, but they actually got a poor trainer the first time that they came around. And then that kind of messes with them mentally, like, oh, do I want to go and do this again? Like, is that what I'm expecting out of professional wrestling? And it's like, what exactly do they mean by poorly trained professional wrestlers? Like, have you ever ran across any?
Yeah, I have. It happens. And I think a lot of the times, one of two things happens. It's either, the person didn't do enough research and they just kind of found the first school that they saw and they went there, and, they don't know any better. So they don't know they're being trained wrong or poorly.
Mm, mm,
Or the other thing is they went there and they were being put on shows before they were ready. And, to a person who wants to wrestle, if you're being told, well, now you can do shows, even if there's a whether or not there's a subconscious part of you that knows you're not trained right, in your mind, you're doing shows. So why do you need to change anything or train more? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, and it's so hard because it really is just like, I tell, anytime I've had some people ask me like, well, what school should I go to? Um, and I say, just put in that time and energy, really research. And the big thing is, look at the names that have come out of that school. If you find a wrestling school and you look at alumni and you can't find any, or you've never heard of any, maybe it's not the best place in the world to go train to be a pro wrestler, you
Mhm.
know. But if you look at a school and they have all of these wrestlers who are doing stuff around the world, well, yeah, that's your goal. So, it really is just about putting in the research, asking around. I'll tell people all the time, when you're at the merch table, that's a great question to ask. Instead of asking me what's my favorite ice cream, ask me where you should go to train to be a pro wrestler. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Um,
Yeah.
so it's information you can find, and it's out there. And as hard as it can be, the you know the if you put in that work and put in that research, it's gonna pay you back in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so cool. Well, I know I wanted to bring up to you the fact that Big Ugly was part of the NorCal Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Hmm.
So, like, was there like a whole like ceremony when that had actually occurred?
Yeah, there was. There, I think they still do the Hall of Fame. But yeah, they do typically. I think it used to be just like an event where they inducted you, and then that was the night. And now over time, I think it's more of a like a show. Like there's
Mm.
actual wrestling at it. Um, but yeah, I was a little too young when he got inducted, so I don't think I was there.
Yeah,
But,
it was like 2012.
yeah, so honestly, I was probably playing sports somewhere. I was probably playing at a rugby game or something. Um, but yeah, he had been inducted and then has inducted several of his students, into the Hall of Fame as well.
That is so awesome. That is really cool.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, before we actually end up closing everything out, I just want to ask you, like, what does it mean to you to have a family that is so into professional wrestling, and then now you are net like that next lineage in that line? What does that mean to you as a performer?
It's amazing, to like, I think there's a little piece of everyone that is, scared that their family isn't gonna care about or understand the thing that they love to do or are passionate about. And we're really blessed in the fact that we all love to do the same thing. So, it's so amazing, and also, the fact that we get to do it together so much, and brainstorm together and wrestle together, travel together. Soon our youngest brother is going to start training as well to hop in the business. So, it's just so amazing that like we all really get to kind of come together in this aspect of our life.
That is so freaking awesome.
Yeah.
That is really cool. Well, I cannot thank you enough for actually joining me here today. It has been an absolute pleasure to sit here and talk with you.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate you having me on. This was a lot of fun.
All right. Well, I hope you have a very, very good night, and I cannot wait to see you soon.
Definitely. Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye. Well, all right, you guys. So that was Interesting's podcast interview with Abigail Warren. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, and ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. Make sure to go and follow me on social media at CodyT503. That's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And remember, on the 20th, Interesting Podcast is going to be having the return of Jackhammer. So this is going to be another interview you guys are not going to want to miss. So make sure you guys hit that notification bell so you guys get notified when I go live. I'll catch you guys later.